5 German Panther tanks, 5 shots fired. 6 minutes, when the smoke cleared over the Norman village of Lingèvre on the afternoon of June 14, 1944. 5 Panthers had been knocked out or destroyed by a single British Sherman Firefly. One British Sherman Firefly had played the decisive role. The gun that killed them should not have existed. 2 determined officers pushed the project forward despite repeated resistance from above. A field east of a Norman village called Lingèvre. Summer sun. A dirt road leading in from Tilly-sur-Seulles, hedges on either side, dust rising from something moving in the distance. 800 meters out, the shape resolves. A Panther. Panzer Division. The elite. 45 tons of sloped steel rolling toward the village at a walking pace. Gun forward. Commander half out of the cupola scanning the road ahead. Behind a low stone wall at the eastern edge of the village, 1 British tank waits. Turret hunched. Barrel long. Camouflage paint on the muzzle brake in a rough counter-shaded stripe. Inside that tank, 4 men have stopped breathing. The commander's name is Sergeant Wilfred Harris. His crew calls him Spit. He is a professional soldier. He does not shout. He is watching the Panther through his binoculars, and he is doing the arithmetic of a killer. At his knee, the gunner. Trooper Ian McKillop. Steady hands. Cheek against the rubber cup of the telescopic sight. The reticle is already on the Panther's glasses plate. The loader has a shell in his hands. It weighs 38 pounds, nearly twice the weight of the shell in every other British tank on the Normandy front. The driver has the transmission in neutral, foot on the clutch, engine idling. None of them will fire yet, because if they fire and miss, the Panther will find them, and the Panther will kill them. The Panther can kill any Sherman at any range from the front. And this Sherman looks like every other Sherman. Same hull, same tracks, same paint. Except for the gun. Freeze there. That gun is the whole story. To understand why 1 British tank in a hedgerow can even think about a Panther at 800 meters, we have to go back 18 months. To a shed in Dorset, and to 2 officers the British War Office wanted to shut up. The idea was simple and unwanted. Britain had a good gun. The 17-pounder anti-tank gun. Long barrel. High velocity. Muzzle velocity nearly 3,000 feet per second. On paper, it could punch through the frontal armor of anything the Germans had built. In practice, it was a towed gun. It sat behind sandbags. It could not chase a Panzer through a wheat field. Britain also had a tank, or rather, Britain had American tanks. The Sherman M4, reliable, available, endless, but armed with a 75mm gun that could not reliably punch through the frontal armor of a Panther or a Tiger at combat range. So somebody said the obvious thing. Put the gun in the tank. The Ministry of Supply's Tank Decision Board said no. The turret was too small. The recoil would tear the mounting apart. The breech was too long. The ammunition was too big. There would be no room for the loader to work. There would be no room for the radio. And besides, there were better British tanks coming. The Challenger. The Cromwell. Wait for those. Major George Brighty did not wait. Brighty was an instructor at the Royal Armoured Corps Gunnery School at Lulworth Camp, on the Dorset coast. A pragmatic officer. He had watched Sherman crews come off the ranges knowing perfectly well what their guns could not do, and he had watched them go off to a war anyway. So Brighty took a 17-pounder gun and he put it in a Sherman turret. His early prototype exposed serious recoil and space problems that many believed could never be solved inside a Sherman turret. The gun sat locked rigid inside the mounting. The prototype placed enormous stress on the mounting, revealing just how difficult fitting the 17-pounder into a Sherman really was. The whole vehicle rocked backward on its tracks. It should not have worked. It worked barely. The ministry remained unconvinced and refused to prioritize the project. Brighty was joined by Lieutenant Colonel George Witheridge. Witheridge had been at Gazala in North Africa in the summer of 1942, commanding an American Grand tank against Rommel's Panzers. His tank had been knocked out. He had been wounded. He knew, in his body, what an inferior gun cost a crew. He had buried friends because of it. Working with engineers and manufacturers, Brighty and Witheridge helped overcome the Firefly's biggest engineering challenges. The breech was redesigned to make loading possible inside the cramped Sherman turret. The wireless set was relocated into an armored bustle box welded onto the rear of the turret, freeing valuable internal space. Additional ammunition storage was created inside the hull after the assistant driver's machine gun position was eliminated to accommodate the much larger 17-pounder rounds. The project continued to face strong institutional resistance. Witheridge went over their heads. He used his connections. He got in front of Major General Raymond Briggs, Director of the Royal Armoured Corps, and Claude Gibb at the Ministry of Supply. He made the argument that everyone in the boardroom already knew was true. The Challenger was late. The Cromwell's turret ring was too narrow for the 17-pounder. There was no other British tank that could do this before the invasion of France. This is the first thing to understand. The Firefly was not built because British doctrine wanted it. It was built because British doctrine had failed, and two officers refused to let the failure become a graveyard for tank crews. The tank that would make Sergeant Harris possible was not a triumph of engineering. It was a workaround, an admission, a hybrid nobody in authority had asked for. In November 1943, the ministry approved production, barely, reluctantly. By the 31st of May 1944, 6 days before the Normandy landings, 342 Fireflies had come off the conversion lines. That was not enough for a war. It was enough for one tank in every 4-tank troop. 1 in 4. The other 3 tanks in the troop would carry the same 75mm gun that could not kill a Panther from the front. Sergeant Harris commanded the 1 in 4. Cut back to Normandy, to the invasion, to a coast that Harris crossed sometime in the first days after the 6th of June with the 4th 7th Royal Dragoon Guards, part of the 8th Armoured Brigade, a regiment with a lineage that ran back long before the last century, now driving American tanks through French villages that had not been fought over since the Middle Ages. They had been in country 8 days when the fight for Longèvre began. Something else had happened in those 8 days, and this is the second thing to understand. The Germans had noticed, somewhere on the Normandy front, in the first 72 hours after D-Day, a German tank commander looked through his optics at an oncoming Sherman troop and saw one gun barrel that was noticeably longer than the others, a gun that reached far past the front of the hull, a gun with a distinctive muzzle brake. He radioed it in. The report went up the chain. It went across units. It became doctrine. Within a week of the landings, every Panzer commander in Normandy was operating under a standing order. When engaging a British or Canadian tank troop, identify the long-barreled Sherman first. Kill it first. Always. Every time. Before the others. The Firefly had been in Normandy for less than a week, and it was already the most hunted vehicle on the Allied side of the front line. Harris knew it. His crews knew it. They had already started painting their gun barrels to make them look shorter. A darker shade at the muzzle. A false shadow line halfway down the barrel. From 500 meters, in bad light. It might buy them a second. It might not. Which brings us to Operation Perch. Perch was Montgomery's attempt to encircle the city of Caen, which the Allies had expected to take on D-Day and had not. By the middle of June, it was clear that Caen was going to be a slow, bloody argument, and Perch was one of the tools Montgomery reached for. The 50th Northumbrian Infantry Division was ordered to push south from the beachhead, to pin down German forces, to take a string of small villages along the way. Longèvre was one of them. The village had been reinforced by the Panzerlehr Division. Panzerlehr was not an ordinary German unit. It had been built out of the training and demonstration schools of the German armored force. Its officers had taught tank warfare. Its crews had been selected. Its equipment was new. On paper, it was arguably the finest armored division in the German army in the summer of 1944. The 151st Infantry Brigade attacked at 10:15 on the morning of the 14th of June. The 9th Battalion of the Durham Light Infantry led it. The 4th 7th Royal Dragoon Guards supported with tanks. By midday, Longèvre was in British hands. Not intact. Not free. Taken. At cost. The acting commander of the 9th Durhams was a young major named John Mogg. He set up a casualty station in the village church, sent runners to organize the surviving infantry into defensive positions, and prepared for the counterattack he knew was coming. Lieutenant Alastair Morrison of the 4th 7th brought 3 tanks into the village. He placed his own Sherman near the church. In the center, he placed Corporal Johnson's Sherman on the road entering from the south. And he placed Sergeant Harris's Firefly at the eastern end, on the main road, facing the direction of Tilly-sur-Seulles. That is where we started. That is where the Panther came from. 12:30, sun climbing, dust on the road, Harris with his binoculars, McKillop with his hand on the traverse control, the loader with a 38-pound shell in his arms, the driver with his foot on the clutch. 800 meters, and closing. The Panther does not know the Firefly is there. Yet. 700 meters. The Panther is close enough now that Harris can see the commander's head above the cupola ring, a young man in a black wrap tunic, binoculars up, scanning the hedges on either side of the road. Not scanning far enough. Not yet. Behind that first Panther, 400 meters back. A second Panther has come around a bend in the road. Same formation, same speed, same confidence. They think Longevre is still theirs. They do not know that the Durhams came through here 2 hours ago and took it. They do not know that a British field ambulance is running in the church behind Harris. They do not know that 3 Shermans are inside the village. They know none of it. That is the gift. Harris lowers his binoculars. 600, he says. His voice is quiet, almost conversational. In some other tank, in some other regiment, a commander might be shouting range and heading and target designation. Harris is not that kind of commander. Harris talks to his gunner the way a man talks to a friend who is doing something delicate. Softly, so the hand does not shake. 600. McKillop repeats. McKillop is young. Young in the way trooper gunners in the 4th 7th tend to be young in the summer of 1944. His eye is at the telescopic sight. His hand is on the elevation wheel. He is making the smallest possible corrections. He is breathing shallow. He is doing what gunnery school trained him to do, and what no amount of gunnery school can actually prepare a man for. The Panther fills more of the reticle now. The gunner in a Sherman Firefly does not fire when his commander says fire. The commander gives him the target and gives him the range, and then the gunner fires when the gunner is ready. That is the arrangement. It has to be. Because when the 17-pounder fires, the powerful recoil rocked the tank noticeably on its suspension. The enormous muzzle flash briefly obscures the crew's vision, and the blast could even ignite dry hedgerows under the right conditions. You get one good shot before the world knows where you are. McKillop takes it. The gun goes off. It is not a sound. It is a blow. The whole vehicle jumps. Harris blinks reflexively and sees red-orange behind his eyelids. In the hull, the driver's ears ring. The loader is already reaching for the next shell before he has heard anything at all. Nearly 3,000 feet per second is the muzzle velocity of a 17-pounder armor-piercing capped round. At 600 meters, the shell takes less than a second to arrive. The Panther crew had little or no warning before the round struck. The round strikes the Panther's frontal armor. The armor is 80 millimeters thick, sloped at 55 degrees. It is supposed to defeat almost everything the Allies can shoot. It does not defeat this. The round punches through, sheds a spray of hot metal into the crew compartment, and something inside the Panther catches. Not the ammunition, not yet. Something smaller, fragments ripped through the fighting compartment, causing catastrophic internal damage. The tank keeps rolling for a moment, driverless, dead men still upright at their stations. Then it drifts to a stop with its right track still turning slowly, going nowhere. The commander does not come out of the cupola. Nobody comes out. Behind Harris's tank, in the hedge, a bright orange line of flame is climbing. The muzzle blast has set the leaves on fire. Smoke is rolling up above the wall. The second Panther sees it. 400 meters back, the second Panther's driver stops the tank so hard the whole vehicle rocks forward on its front road wheels. The turret starts to traverse. That turret rotates slowly. Panther crews used to complain about it. The hydraulics depend on the engine running hard. And when a Panther has been rolling at low speed with the engine at idle, the traverse is sluggish. Sluggish enough to matter. Sluggish enough, right now, to matter more than anything else in this man's life. McKillop is already tracking. Same target, Harris says. Same target, McKillop says. The loader slams the breech shot on the second round. The empty case from the first shot has been kicked out onto the turret floor. It is smoking. The whole interior of the tank smells of cordite and burnt paint. The gun goes off again. The second Panther takes the round through the front plate, roughly where the first one did, roughly the same range, roughly the same angle. The result is not the same. This time the ammunition goes. There is a moment where the turret of the Panther seems to shudder. Then the entire top of the vehicle lifts. Not high, just enough. A violent internal explosion tears through the fighting compartment, sending flames through every opening, tilts sideways, and falls back into the hull at an angle. Fire pours out of every opening. The driver's hatch, the loader's hatch, the commander's cupola. No crewmen are seen escaping. 2 shots. 2 Panthers. 90 seconds. Harris does not celebrate. He does not speak. He looks at the burning hedge in front of his tank and he knows, with a professional certainty, that the 4th 7th Royal Dragoon Guards have just marked their position with a bonfire that any German artillery observer within 5 miles is now radioing in. Reverse, he says. Move. The driver reverses. The Firefly backs away from the burning hedge, turns hard, and rolls west, along the back gardens of the village. Harris is repositioning to the western edge of Langevre, near a farmhouse on the road that comes in from La Senaudière. He does not know that while he is moving, another Panther is doing the same thing from a different direction. While Harris drives west, a third German Panther is coming into the village from a different road. It rolls past the 2 burning wrecks of its comrades without stopping, its commander presumably staring at them and understanding, in real time, that something has gone very wrong here. It comes into Langevre itself, up the main street toward the church, where Major Mogg has his casualty station. Corporal Johnson's Sherman is there. Johnson's tank is not a Firefly. Johnson's tank is a standard Sherman with a 75mm gun. Johnson's gun cannot penetrate a Panther's front plate at any useful range. Johnson knows this. His crew knows this. They fire anyway. The 75mm round bounces off the Panther's glacis and howls off into the sky. The Panther's turret traverses toward Johnson's tank. There is a pause of maybe 2 seconds. Then the Panther fires. The 75mm KWK-42 round goes through the front of Johnson's Sherman like it is not there. Inside the tank, men are wounded. Some of the crew get out, some do not get out easily. Sources from that afternoon disagree on the exact toll, and there is no honest way to close that gap now. What is certain is that the tank is on fire in the middle of the village, 20 meters from the church, in view of the wounded Durhams laid out on the pews. The bell in the tower is ringing from the concussion. The paintwork on the doors is beginning to blister. This is the part of Langevre that does not make the highlight reel. While Sergeant Harris is being fitted for legend, a corporal named Johnson is being pulled out of a burning tank by men who know their gun could not have saved him. The village that the Firefly is famous for defending is not defending itself for free. It is being paid for in Sherman crews who took the shot they had to take with the gun they had been issued and lost. Nobody will make a video about Corporal Johnson. Harris is on the western edge now. He has found what he wanted, a firing position tucked in behind a stone wall near a farmhouse, angled south and west, covering the road from La Senaudière. In front of him, open ground. Behind him, the village. To his left, the road he expects the next German attack to come up. He is right. They come 3 abreast, 3 more Panthers, all from Panzerlehr, all approaching Langevre from the west, because the German battalion commander somewhere off in the fields has been listening to his radio and has decided that the Britisher he cannot see needs to be found and killed by weight of numbers. The 3 Panthers come up the road in a loose formation, not line abreast, not textbook. They are being cautious now. They have heard what happened at the eastern approach. They know a Firefly is in the village somewhere. They just do not know where. They are looking east, toward Harris's old position. Harris is west of them, on their flank. They are showing him their sides. The side armor on a Panther is 40 to 50 millimeters thick, roughly vertical, with almost no slope worth mentioning. It was designed on the assumption that Panthers would fight facing forward. In the tactical reality of Normandy, where hedgerows and villages break formations into fragments. Panthers spend a great deal of their combat life showing their sides to somebody. The 17-pounder does not have to try very hard to defeat 40 millimeters of vertical armor at 400 meters. MacKillop does not have to try very hard either. The first flanking shot goes into the lead Panther's engine deck. Not the side, the engine deck, which is thinner still. The tank stops as if it has run into a wall, and then, a second later, black smoke boils up out of the louvers. The crew starts bailing. The commander comes out of the cupola with his tunic already on fire and drops off the side of the tank into the ditch, and then the driver, and then the radio operator, and then nobody else. The other two Panthers are still moving forward. They have not yet processed what is happening. Panzer commanders in the summer of 1944 have not been trained to expect a Sherman on their flank. Shermans are not supposed to be able to do this to them. Shermans are supposed to be prey. MacKillop is already on the second one. The round goes into the running gear. It kills the steering. The Panther slews sideways off the road, into the field, and stops with its front toward Harris now, gun swinging. Too late. The loader has the third shell in the breech before the second Panther's turret has moved through 15 degrees. The third Panther is trying to reverse. MacKillop fires again. The shell goes in through the side of the turret, above the road wheels, and comes out somewhere Harris cannot see, and the third Panther's engine dies, and the whole vehicle rolls back a foot on the slight downhill grade and stops with a lazy plume of black smoke leaking from a hatch on the top. Nobody gets out. 3 shots. 3 more Panthers. Perhaps 2 minutes. The empty 17-pounder cases are piled on the turret floor of this Firefly like discarded bottles. The interior of the tank smells of hot brass and cordite so strong that the driver, sealed in the hull, has started to cough. The loader is soaked through with sweat. He has moved 5 38-pound shells in about 6 minutes, in a space too small to stand up in, while the tank was reversing and repositioning and firing. His arms are shaking. MacKillop's cheek is still against the sight. He is looking at the 3 burning Panthers in front of him, and he is waiting to see if there is a fourth. There isn't. Not right now. Harris keys his radio and reports to his squadron. He is calm. He is professional. He asks for reconnaissance to the east and to the west. He does not mention how many tanks he has just destroyed. He does not have to. The pillars of black smoke are doing that for him, and they are visible from a very long way away. In the church behind him, Major Mogg is still overseeing the casualty station he set up when the village fell. Corporal Johnson's Sherman is still burning in the street. The German counterattack is not over. It is, in fact, about to get worse. 5:50 in the afternoon. The sun is lower now. The shadows in the Norman hedgerows have gotten long. The smoke from the burning Panthers has stopped rolling and settled into a thin grey haze that hangs over the fields west of Longevre and does not move. The Germans come again. This time it is not tanks. This time it is infantry. Panzer Grenadiers, the mounted infantry of Panzer Lehr, dismounted now and moving through the wheat and the orchards on foot, in short rushes, with machine pistols and rifle grenades. They are working their way toward the village from the south and the west. They have artillery behind them. The artillery starts falling on Longevres a few minutes before the infantry does. Inside the church, the wounded of the 9th Durhams are pushed lower against the flagstones. A shell hits the roof, and part of the slate comes down onto the pews. Major Mogg is organizing what defenses the surviving Durhams can still hold. A field ambulance orderly reaches up with one hand to steady an unlit candle that has begun to tremble on the altar. Outside, in the ruins of the village street, Corporal Johnson's Sherman is still smoldering. Sergeant Harris is still in his firing position on the western edge. He has not moved the Firefly since he stopped the 3 Panthers. He is watching the wheat for movement. His loader is drinking water from a canteen with both hands because his arms will not hold it steady with one. MacKillop's eye is at the site. He is looking for tanks that are not there. The tanks are gone. The men who come next will be on foot. And MacKillop's gun is not for men on foot. They hold. The Durhams hold too. In the trenches they scratched out during the afternoon along the northern and eastern edges of the village. Some of them are the same men who took Lingevre at 11 in the morning. Some of them are already dead. Some of them are being carried back to the church. The ones who can still hold a rifle hold it. 7:20 in the evening. The sound in the sky changes. It is a specific sound, And every man on the Allied side of the Normandy front has learned to know it in 8 days. It is the sound of Merlin engines coming in low. Rolls-Royce Merlins, in pairs, in fours, in flights. Supermarine Spitfires of the Royal Air Force. They come across Langevre from the north, and they turn out over the German positions to the south, and they begin to work. The counterattack breaks. Not in a single moment, not cleanly. It breaks the way German counterattacks broke all through Normandy that summer, in pieces, over the space of an hour, as the survivors decide one by one that today is not the day, and start to fall back. By full dark, Langevre is still in British hands. The 50th Northumbrian Division has met its objectives for the 14th of June. Operation Perch has moved a small distance south. Caen has not fallen. Caen will not fall for weeks yet. The men who took Langevre will not remember Langevre as a victory. An officer of the 6th Durhams, writing later, will call the attack that morning the best one his battalion launched in the entire campaign. He will not mean that it was pleasant. He will mean that it was well done. This is what men who were in Normandy meant when they used that word. Sergeant Harris pulls his Firefly out of the western position after full dark. Somewhere, a fitter checks the tank for damage. Somewhere, the loader stops moving and does not know how tired he is until he stops. Somewhere, Trooper McKillop lights a cigarette and his hand shakes for the first time all day. The intelligence officers come the next morning. They walk the field west of the village and they count. They walk to the eastern approach and they count. They photograph the wrecks. They measure the penetration holes. They interview Harris. They interview the loader. They probably interview McKillop. Though the record of what he told them, if it survives at all, is in a file box in a warehouse in England that almost nobody has ever asked to see. The report goes up. 5 Panthers destroyed or knocked out. The report credited Harris's Firefly with knocking out or destroying 5 Panthers during the fighting that afternoon. All in the space of an afternoon. All from one crew. Panzerlehr Division. The elite. Not green replacements. Not conscripts. The best armored division the German army had in Normandy in June of 1944. 5 of their tanks, gone. To 5 shells fired by a young British trooper looking through a British telescopic sight in an American tank hull. The report gets attention. By the end of June, every British armored regiment in 21st Army Group has heard some version of what happened at Langevre. The story travels the way soldier stories travel. The numbers change a little from mouth to mouth. The names get a little garbled. Some of the tellings put Harris in a different position than he was actually in. Some of them credit the shots to the commander instead of the gunner, because that is how tank stories in the Second World War tended to get told. The commander gets the medal and the gunner gets the paycheck. Harris will receive the military medal for the action. The military medal, not the military cross. The distinction is important and worth stating plainly. The military cross is an officer's decoration. The military medal is for other ranks, for the sergeants and corporals and troopers who are, by the categories of the British Army of 1944, not gentlemen. Harris is not a gentleman. He is a sergeant. He gets the medal for sergeants. McKillop's part in the action is noted in the paperwork. What he receives, if anything, is harder to pin down in the surviving records. This is not because McKillop did not matter. It is because in the tank of 1944, the gunner was a rank-and-file soldier doing his job. And doing his job with lethal precision was not always the sort of thing that generated its own paperwork. The men in the tank knew. Harris knew. The other thing that happens after Langevres is that the Germans learn they already had a standing order to kill Fireflies first. Now they have a story to attach to the order. A story about 5 of their best tanks stopped in one afternoon by one long-barreled Sherman in a Norman village. The story sharpens the order. It gives it teeth. Through the second half of June and into July and August, the panzer crews of Normandy stop treating Fireflies as one target among several. They start treating them as the target. When a British troop of 4 tanks comes into view, the panzer commander no longer looks for the officer's tank, or the closest tank, or the tank that is shooting at him. He looks for the one gun barrel that is longer than the others. He puts his first round into that. The Firefly camouflage schemes get more elaborate. Counter-shaded paint, false muzzle brakes, barrels wrapped in mud or sacking, none of it fully works. From 500 meters, the barrel is still visibly longer than the others. from 200 meters, in a hedgerow. It does not matter what color the barrel is. By the end of the summer of 1944, Firefly losses in Normandy had climbed to a level that alarmed British armored commanders. The very thing that made the Firefly valuable, the long gun that could reach a Panther, was the thing that got it seen and killed. The workaround had a cost, and the cost was being paid one Firefly at a time in fields and lanes and villages that most Americans and most Britons could not find on a map today. Only 342 Fireflies had reached the units by the eve of D-Day. Every one of them was doing the work of a specialist weapon that was not supposed to exist. Harris and McKillop survive it. Their tank survives it. Something about the way that particular crew moves through the summer of 1944 keeps them out of the statistic. They fight through the rest of Normandy. They go on into Belgium in September. They keep going. They live through the war. And here is where the story gets quiet. Wilfred Harris comes home in 1945 to a country that is exhausted and rationed and does not want to talk about tanks. He does not write a book. He does not give an interview to a newspaper. He does not sit for a documentary. He puts down his uniform and picks up whatever life he was going to have anyway. Ian McKillop does the same. He does not write a book either. He does not correct any of the versions of the story that begin, in the years after the war, to appear in regimental histories with the names slightly wrong and the ranges slightly off. There is no photograph of him standing next to the burnt-out Panthers. The village of Longèvre rebuilds. The war memorial in the center of the village, which had shell marks on it from the 14th of June, still has those shell marks on it today. The buildings around the memorial are new. The road that comes in from Tilly-sous-Seul is paved and quiet now. Cars drive on it. Farm equipment. Sometimes a coach full of visitors on a battlefield tour, and a guide who stands roughly where Harris parked his Firefly and points at the church, and points down the road and tells the story. The story has become a headline. 5 shots, 5 Panthers. It is the kind of headline that does very well on the internet in the 21st century, with an older audience, with men who remember when their fathers or their uncles or the men down the street came back from that war and did not talk about it either. The headline captures the essence of what happened, even if the full story is more complex. But the truth underneath the headline is more complicated, and the men who were there would want you to know it, if any of them were still alive to say so. Corporal Johnson's Sherman burned in the middle of Longèvre that day. His 75mm gun could not have penetrated the Panther that killed him at any range that mattered. He fired anyway. He fired because he was there, and because the Panther was there, and because the men of the 9th Durham Light Infantry were in the church behind him, and would have died if he had not. The Panther killed him for it. The men of the 9th Durhams took heavy casualties on the 14th of June. The village they took at that price. The Panthers that Harris destroyed on the western approach were coming to take it back and drive them out and kill the wounded on the pews of the church. And if Harris and McKillop had not been there with the one gun in the troop that could stop a Panther, that is what would have happened. That is what a Firefly was for. Not 5 shots and 5 kills and a headline. That was the afternoon. The whole thing was the 9th Durhams in the wheat, and Corporal Johnson in the burning Sherman, and Major Mogg in the church, and a young trooper named McKillop with his cheek against a rubber sight cup, doing arithmetic with other men's lives. Some of them came home. Some of them did not. The gun that Brighty and Witheridge built against orders, in a shed at Lulworth, against the wishes of the Ministry of Supply, against the doctrine of the British Army, is why the ones who came home came home. They did not write about it. We are writing about it for them.